wanted to provide, again, an introduction here. You saw where I went to school. We talked about that. I had my bachelor's from the University of California in Berkeley, and then of course my law degree and my master's from American University out here in DC. Afterwards, I joined a pro bono law firm called the Public International Law and Policy Group, and I worked on kind of big public international issues such as peace negotiations, constitutional drafting. I specifically worked for, one of our clients was the government of South Sudan before the independence referendum, before South Sudan became a country. So that was a very exciting time, working on kind of really complicated legal issues of what does it mean for a state to succeed from a parent state. Afterwards, I did a Fulbright. And that's where this picture is from. I did a Fulbright in Bangladesh, where I was a special legal assistant in the Ministry of Law. This was a number of years ago. And I worked on a lot of reform projects, everything from access to justice for women, which is where this picture is from, to digitalizing land records, property records, to working on alternative dispute resolutions to try to help the backlog in the courts in Bangladesh. And so that was a really amazing experience for me. After coming back from Dhaka, I joined the State Department. And these are the two offices listed here that I've been a part of. So first is called the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. It's a big fancy name that basically means we got money from Congress here in the United States to conduct criminal justice projects overseas. So we worked in other countries like Bangladesh, working on reforming the police or the legal framework, or working with prosecutors, working with judges, working in prisons. And so I specifically, with my legal background, was working on justice issues. So the laws, prosecutors, judges, and it was really interesting and fulfilling work. I got to travel to lots of different countries that I had never been to before, so that was a lot of fun. And then I have recently moved to the Secretary's Office for Global Women's Issues. And I'm going to talk about that one a little bit more, because I would be remiss not to touch on that, given that it's Women's History Month. So it's a perfect kind of tie-in. I'll say personally, from my background, I was born here in the States, but my father came from Bangladesh, and then he met my mom. Most of my family still lives back in Dhaka, and we go back and visit a lot. So it definitely, holds a close place in my heart. My husband and I were just there, before COVID, and we hope to go back soon. So like I said, I want to talk a little bit more about my office that I work in right now, since it is Women's History Month. And we just had, International Women's Day was on Monday. And it was also a really important day because we had, the State Department had its International Women of Courage Awards on Monday. This is where that picture is from, with Dr. Biden presenting awards to about 15 different women from around the world. No one from Bangladesh this year, but 4 different Bangladeshi women have been awarded this award in the past. But one of the, as you can see from this kind of the language on the screen, our office's main goal is to promote gender perspectives, gender equality throughout the US government, not just the State Department, not just our foreign policy, but, working with the Department of Defense or, Department of Homeland Security, the housing agency, right? To figure out how to look at issues or how to figure out how issues affect men and women differently. And one of the things that we say for our office is one of our goals is for our office not to exist, because that means that everybody else around us is doing this kind of work already, and we don't have to remind them. So a lot of our work is working internally within the government with our colleagues and whatnot, helping them, think through these gender perspectives. We work overseas with other countries, their governments, civil society groups, thinking about, how do we promote and advance the empowerment of women? One of the issues I'm working on right now is the peace process for Afghanistan, right? And how do we preserve the gains that have been made in the country for women over the last 20 years? And how can we make sure that women have a seat at the table for, between the Afghan government and the Taliban when they're deciding what the future of the country should look like? So our office was created back in 1994 with legislation, with congressional legislation, and we answer directly to the secretary. So especially now with this administration, there's a lot of focus on gender equality. There was a big executive order on the Gender Equality Council at the White House on Monday. So we see this as going to be kind of a priority for our administration for the next 4 years or so. But getting to the heart of the matter, why I'm here today, is talking about lawyers and the federal government. And I want to talk about the different types of lawyers, because I think people kind of focus on traditional lawyer role, which is perfectly valid. But there's also a variety of different positions that people can engage in either as a full-time career or as like contract and consulting opportunities, right? So the traditional lawyer role that we see in a lot of different agencies is one of like a general counsel or a legal advisor, right? The State Department, it's the Office of the Legal Advisor. So they'll advise on anything and everything from like treaty negotiations all the way to our like contracts for our property on embassies overseas, right? Or employment issues, of course, all those really important legal stuff that happens. So there is those kind of positions that exist. They're highly coveted, highly competitive within the government. And so they exist at all the different agencies. But I think one of the aspects that is kind of less known are these attorney advisor positions. So you're not necessarily a general counsel or a legal advisor. You're not dealing with, property contracts for our embassies, but you're working on policy. You're working on, there's capacity building involved. So I had threw up a couple of pictures just to make the slide a little bit more interesting, but also to demonstrate my point. So the picture you'll see with the 4 women, this was a training that we conducted for women prosecutors, judges, police officers in Armenia, and those are all women who have justice positions, who are lawyers themselves here in the United States. And so we did a training for them because it's something that the Armenian legal system is not able to train them on. They don't have good training capacity or academies. And so, we can provide those kind of capacity building when it comes to not only what does it mean, for example, to be a woman judge, for instance, but also, sensitivities when it comes to like domestic violence, things like that. There's also ways to influence policy, right? So these 2 pictures, the other 2 pictures, the one in the middle is actually a picture of a appellate court, so kind of a middle court in the Central African Republic, in the capital of Bangui. So that's what their courtroom looks like. The desk to the side is where the judge would sit, and then the parties would sit on one side, and there's a little bit of a viewing gallery for others. And the other picture, the one with the beautiful mountain, is from Bolivia. So these are 2 trips that I took where we went and we thought through, what can the United States do? Does the United States have a role? Can we partner with these countries, their governments, and think about how to increase the capacity of the legal system here, right? So it can be more responsive to its citizens and to provide that kind of, legal service, especially when it comes to like, crime or the criminal justice system, and then some civil issues as well. So I think there's an important role that attorney advisors or lawyers can play in this kind of less traditional lawyer role, where we're thinking through like, what should the United States be doing in certain areas and doing certain governments? How can we use our lessons learned, our best practices, and kind of assist our partners around the world in that? And there's also a way to influence policy. Like lawyers have a very important role in that, right? We are constantly negotiating and talking through like UN Security Council statements and resolutions, and other kind of multilateral agreements that aren't treaties, for example, but still have a legal obligation, and still require our government to do stuff, right? So it takes a very specific eye to look at those issues, and to think through what should the United States be held accountable for. So primarily with those capacity building positions that I was talking about, or that expertise, there's a lot of roles, and I would encourage everyone to think through this. There's a lot of leeway for people who, don't necessarily want to leave their practice or leave the career that they have, but to contribute to our efforts, right? We're always looking for people with subject matter expertise in very specific areas to come in. So while I would conduct trainings in other countries, I would also need to bring in experts who could talk specifically about like, IP law, or, let's talk about like cyber crimes, or even, very specific elements that I don't have that expertise in. So there are these kind of consulting, contracting opportunities in a variety of our departments, agencies that really focus overseas, that I would just encourage everyone to kind of keep in the back of your mind, because it's a great way, it's a great public service skill, and it's a great way to kind of assist others who are interested in learning. I've always had positive experiences doing this. The last thing I'll just mention is kind of the different categories, right, when it comes to being a part of the federal government. So you'll see that we have civil servants, exempted civil service, foreign service officers, and contractors. Those kind of like the main buckets. So civil servants are the ones who, go through this website that I have a screenshot at the bottom, this USA Jobs, and they apply for these positions throughout the government, different agencies, what have you, to work as a bureaucrat as their career. A lot of the attorney, like legal advisor positions, the general counsel positions that I mentioned, are part of this second class here, this exempted civil servants. So civil servant positions, just a very weird quirk, can't necessarily require something like a law degree. So when you want a general counsel who is a lawyer, you have to do the second category. So I put that in there just for people's awareness. So if they're interested in finding those particular positions, they're not scared off by that term. The foreign service, there is a number of agencies that have some sort of foreign service component to them, or work overseas in our embassies, primarily the State Department, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Department of Justice, and all of its organs like the FBI and whatnot. They have kind of these rotating bases or rotating services overseas where you can work in our embassy, and you can do, work on a variety of different issues all around the world. And then lastly is contractors. That was how I was first hired into the government as a contractor, because again, it's just an easier mechanism than USA Jobs. One unfortunate portion about contractor positions, for those who are interested, there's no aggregate website where it lists all the different contractor positions. A lot of it is about who you know, and if you know the companies that are bidding on these positions. So unfortunately, there's not a very good pathway as opposed to just networking and talking to people, which I know that this is a great forum for that. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more as well. So I just wanted to give a very broad overview of those kind of different positions. And like I said, I think it's important to remember different ways that lawyers can use your skills in the federal government, especially for these kind of different positions, because there is a need, and it's not always, these positions are not always advertised as a lawyer or attorney position. So it's important to keep your eye out for them. So that's my very, very quick presentation, because I just wanted to throw some stuff on the screen. But I'm happy to take any questions now, or if questions come up later, I'm happy to, chat later as well. So thanks so much for listening.